All right, welcome in. It's the Breer Report for September the 24th, a mailbag edition. As always, there's a print mailbag that's going up on the mmqb.com. That should be up a little later in the day. On Wednesday, we'll have more answers, more detailed answers to more of your questions over there. But as always, we're going to get to three questions right here, right now. The first question coming from Henry Matthews. That's at Henry M. Huss 26H. Who can't afford a loss between Baltimore versus Kansas City on Sunday if they want to make the playoffs? Henry, I don't want to minimize the importance of this game because it is a big game, because somebody is going to come out of this game barring a tie at 1-3. And that's a very big deal as far as where playoff games are going to be played, who might be in play for the bye, all of those things. But I don't think this is a must win for either team. And I think this is sort of what the NFL is now, which is for the very best teams that have the best quarterbacks, that are the most stable organizations with the best coaches, have the flexibility to use the first 3, 4, 5 weeks of the season to manage injuries, to develop schemes, to figure out what they're good at, and then come up with a plan to lean into that. So I think that's where both the Ravens and the Chiefs are right now. And I think in both cases, these things are explainable. The Ravens lost a couple of close games to two of the very best teams in the NFL. One of them, of course, was to Buffalo on opening night. The other one was on Monday night to the Lions. The Lions won 15 games last year. The Bills were in the AFC title game. So I don't think in either case you can look at it and say, man, that's a real sign of trouble. They lost to two teams that are among two of the best in all of the NFL. Meanwhile, the Chiefs' two losses were to the reigning Super Bowl champions, the Philadelphia Eagles, and in Brazil to a Chargers team that I think is going to be there in the end as well. I think then you got to look at like what each team has waiting ahead of them in October. And I got the schedules up in front of me here. The Chiefs are facing the Jaguars, Lions, Raiders, and Commanders. The Ravens are facing the Texans, Rams, Bears, and Dolphins. Both teams also have their byes in October. So I think for either team, if you come out of this at 1-3, there's still a decent chance, maybe better than decent chance, that you get up to 500 by Halloween, and that puts you in position to contend down the stretch. Again, it's not ideal, but I think for both teams, there's a chance to continue to develop your team, continue to figure out what you're good at, what you're going to be best at, continue to manage injuries. And, for the Chiefs, it's going to mean getting Rashee Rice back after week 6. It's going to mean getting Xavier Worthy back from injury. It's going to mean more experience for their rookie left tackle, Josh Simmons. For the Ravens, it's going to mean continuing to develop what you've got on defense, where they've had some issues, to be fair, to continue to figure out the best mix at corner among Nate Wiggins and Chidobe Awuzie and Marlon Humphrey, and, of course, Jair Alexander, who's new there. I have full confidence both these teams are going to figure it out. I have full confidence both these teams are going to be in the bracket. I think for both teams, the question is, are you going in as the 2 seed playing the last team in, or are you going in as the 5 or the 6 seed where now you're going to have to go on the road in week 1? And in all likelihood, you'd have to go on the road 3 weeks in a row just to get to the Super Bowl. So big game, but I don't think this is a question of survival for either team. Question number 2 is from Kareem. That's at Saudi Colt. Is the age of quarterback resurrection here to stay? And was it Jared Goff who started it all in Detroit? And is it a change of scenery, coaching, just quarterbacks growing up, or all of the above that's fueling it? Kareem, I'd say it's all of the above. I think too often we look at these things and we divorce the quarterback from his circumstances. And too often these quarterbacks go into situations where they're being drafted by bad teams, which are usually the teams that have the highest picks. And they walk into situations where maybe the coach is already on the hot seat, or the coach is new and he's a head coach for the first time. And there's all kinds of development or pressure or whatever else it is going on around them. They're going onto rosters that aren't very good. And before you know it, you're in year 3 or year 4. You've already been through a coaching change. You've had a bunch of moving parts around you on offense, and you've never had a chance to really settle in. More often than not, a young quarterback needs his circumstances to lift him up. Then when he gets later in his career, he can be the guy who's the force multiplier, the guy who's lifting everyone else up. But there are very few quarterbacks who've walked into bad circumstances early in their careers and been able to automatically, like right off the bat, be the type of guy who can lift everyone around them up. Andrew Luck is one. Jaden Daniels walked into a situation last year that wasn't perfect, but you could say that he was already lifting some people up around him, but that's very, very, very rare. I think Daniel Jones is the best example of this. And there are a few good examples of it. Baker Mayfield's another one we'll pick out, but Daniel Jones, if you look at the first 4 years of his career, he had 3 head coaches. He went from Pat Shurmur to Joe Judge from Pat Shurmur to Joe Judge and then to Brian Daboll. He had 4 different play callers. He had Pat Shurmur as a play caller first, then under Joe Judge, Jason Garrett, then Freddie Kitchens. Then that 4th year, they had Mike Kafka calling plays. Daboll was in there some too. And that was actually when he turned the corner. And then going into year 5, plays 6 weeks, gets hurt. I mean, I don't know who would have played really well through those circumstances, given everything that was going on around him, given like just the ability of the people around him to lift him up. I'm not sure it was there for him. Baker Mayfield, he's drafted in 2018. At that time, Hugh Jackson was the head coach there. Todd Haley was his play caller. After a few weeks, he becomes the starter. Then Hugh Jackson, Todd Haley are both fired. They have Greg Williams as the head coach. They have Freddie Kitchens as the coordinator and the play caller. Year 2, Freddie Kitchens is the head coach. You have Todd Monken as the offensive coordinator. Year 3, Kevin Stefanski and Alex Van Pelt come in and they stabilize it and they make the playoffs. And then 2021, a little more uneven, and he's traded. It's just too often it looks like that for these young guys. Too often these guys aren't given the opportunity to develop. And I think in a lot of cases, the scars that these guys incur wind up being assets for them later in their careers. And so I think the age of quarterback resurrection is not about the quarterbacks themselves so much as it is about talented guys going into situations that are untenable and then eventually figuring it out and eventually benefiting from all the bad that was around them. And so I think you can see it with Geno Smith. You can see it with Sam Darnold. You can see it with Baker Mayfield. You can see it with Daniel Jones. I think the ultimate example of it, if you want to go further back, was Alex Smith, who had 6 coordinators his first 6 years in the NFL. Jim Harbaugh finally stabilized it for him. And he became a starter in the NFL and a really good starter in the NFL for almost a decade. It was so valuable to Andy Reid's build in Kansas City. So I think that as long as you have owners with a quick trigger finger that keep turning over rosters, that keep turning over coaching staffs, that keep making change for change's sake, you're going to see these situations continue to arise. And it's no mistake, by the way, if you look at the 3 guys who I think most people would say right now are the 3 best quarterbacks in the NFL, with Joe Burrow hurt, if you move them over to the side, the 3 best quarterbacks in the NFL right now, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. Those 3 guys were all drafted onto playoff teams. And people forget that. But in all 3 cases, it was playoff teams. Well, in 2 of the cases, it was playoff teams trading way up in the draft to get them. And then in another case, it was the quarterback, Lamar Jackson, falling to 32, where Baltimore was able to grab him. But, certainly I think this is more about circumstances than it is about the quarterbacks themselves. And you got to give guys like Geno and Baker and Daniel Jones and Geno Smith a lot of credit for fighting through that and winding up being really good players on the other side. And Jared Goff is a good example too, although his story is a little bit different, of course, because he was in a good circumstance after his rookie year, which was a tough circumstance. The team moved. He's with Jeff Fisher. He's able to bounce back with Sean McVay. That doesn't work out when the team gets close to winning for a championship. But then he goes into a place where he's able to be the guy. He's given some rope to go through some ups and downs. They trust him. They put their arm around him. They say, you're our guy. And we see the result of that. Finally, our third question. This is from Dylan Waite. That's at Waite on Me. Guys, can you elaborate to the best of your knowledge on the culture change in the organization and belief that Harbaugh has instilled in Herbert, and possibly note any leadership changes you have heard about with Herbert? Dude looks different. Dylan, he does look different. I think, the first thing is, like a lot of people look at quarterbacks and say a lot of it is about who they're throwing to. That's part of it. That's not all of it. Okay. A huge part of putting a quarterback in a position to succeed is how you're managing what's around him. what does his run game look like? His run game is going to put him in 2nd and 6 and 3rd and 2 more often, where the full playbook is open and the defense is limited in what they can throw at you. Makes things easier on the quarterback. How is your defense playing, right? If you got a really good defense and the score is low, you're playing from behind less. Where quarterbacks have to be Superman is when they're down by 20 or when they're in 3rd and 15. And even the best quarterbacks, when they're put in those situations constantly, tend to struggle. So how can you limit those situations? Even in the Eagles comeback, let's go to the Eagles comeback on Sunday, right? In that second half, they're down 26-7. They come all the way back. They were only in 3rd and more than 5 3 times in the second half of that game. So even in having to come from behind, they were able to manage that situation where they were constantly in favorable down and distance situations. They put their quarterback in a position to succeed. And in those 3 3rd and longs, Jalen Hurts had the full complement of plays at his disposal. They weren't having to unload the clip because they had been in those situations 6, 8, 10 times. And so with Herbert, you're more committed to the running game, you're bigger up front, and you've got a really good defense. And so I think that's part of it. And then the other piece of it that I think where I think it looks different this year, Greg Roman went up to Oregon this summer, went up there with clips, a bunch of cut-ups to make a point to Justin Herbert. There were cut-ups of Patrick Mahomes. There were cut-ups of Josh Allen. The idea was, look at these guys when they run. And it's not that those guys were running that much, but he wanted to show Herbert, like, if you run a little bit more, if you escape the pocket and churn out the 6 or 8 yard gain, or you break the pocket and you're able to find somebody downfield because you've turned a play into a scramble drill, that can be backbreaking for a defense. There's nothing tougher on defense than you have a good rush plan, you cover well, and nope, there goes the quarterback. He picked up 6 yards. He moved the chains. It is demoralizing for a defense. So they couldn't do as much of that in 2024 because Herbert had plantar fasciitis over the summer, because Herbert injured his ankle in season. But they really wanted to activate that part of his game, and that's made him even more difficult to defend. And you're seeing, I think, now what Justin Herbert can become with really good circumstances around him, which brings us back to that second question. Appreciate you guys sending the questions in. Appreciate you guys coming out and watching this. Please leave us a review on YouTube. You can do that just by punching the buttons down below us, or you can get me any of your feedback at Albert Breer on Twitter, at Albert R. Breer on Facebook, at Albert_Breer on Instagram. We will be back on Friday previewing week 4 with another Breer Report.